Processing University presents Issues and Challenges in Sterile Processing, a podcast conversation. Today's episode is Equipment, Capacity, Planning and Sterile Processing, Having the Right Tools for the Job. I'm Jason Morosi, Senior Educator.
And I'm Nancy Chauvin, the president of Sterile Processing University.
Okay, we got, I guess, a very important topic today, Nancy. This is if you don't plan it, then you're not successful.
If you don't plan it, you don't have it. If you don't have it, you're in deep trouble.
Yes.
That. Let's say, for example, you're getting a whole new department. Now, hospitals are different than surgery centers, so we'll talk about the hospitals first. If you're getting a whole new department, you have to do some homework. You have to find out, are you planning to add any new services? Are you bringing in more robots? Are you bringing in a new service that you don't have right now? And what type of instrumentation will be needed? Are we going to need special equipment to clean that instrumentation? So all of that is important during the pre-planning, because what most people understand is that you usually get a new department every 15 to 20 years if you're lucky.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, okay? So you don't plan equipment just for you need today. You need to plan for ahead. Most of our sterile processing departments are on the basement level for good reason, because we do use a lot of water and things leak. So if you don't plan ahead and you have to add washers or sonics, now they have to come in and jackhammer up the basement where you are, which is a nightmare. It interferes with your processing and what have you. So you first got to do your homework and, meet with the powers that be to decide, are you going to be adding any new services? Engineering is one department that knows from the get-go. One of my own departments had a beautiful decontam, but it was very, very old, and they were renovating it. And so when I met with them, I said, any new services? No, we're fine. They're not adding any ORs. They have 18. They're staying there. Okay, fine. So we planned the department. It was absolutely beautiful. They were getting ready to turn over the department to us, meaning we could start using it. And the engineering guy is there. He said, this is going to be great, but the 2 additional ORs they're putting on. I said, what? He said, yeah, didn't you know they're going to add 2 more ORs? I said, wait a minute. 1 year ago, I asked them and they said, no more ORs. He said, oh, it's been on the books for a while. So was I lied to? I don't know. But the point is that department started out behind the 8 ball. And once that starts, it's virtually impossible to catch up. So, you've got to show the documentation. If you have a tracking system, they don't want to know that you did 1 million instruments. They want to know how many sets you did, okay? Because when we put instruments through, it's in a set. How many loaners we did. That is really important information. If you're in a small hospital, it may be difficult. You'll have to do that manually. But you've got to give them the documentation to fight for the equipment you need. And you always want backup and couple backups if you can, because equipment is going to go down. And if you only have the washers you need and you have one go down, now you're in a situation where you're going to be backed up. You're going to be rushing to get things through. You have to prioritize things. And of course, you can't plan for the loaners.
Yes.
You don't know when those cases are going to be booked and what company they're going to be coming from or how many trays. So you've got to have that cushion there. And for some reason, it's just not considered. We have a budget. We have to maintain the budget. You're not going to be able to pay for anything if we can't produce the instrumentation for you to do the surgery to make the money.
Uh-huh.
You've really got to fight for what you need. And that's where, once you get that information, use your operating room, use your risk management, use your infection prevention people to support you in getting the equipment you need. So again, you might have 18 ORs and you're going to need 6 washers. But if you're a basic hospital that is not doing robotics, you do, maybe 5 total joints a week. You're doing mainly GYN and stuff like that. You probably could get away with 3 washers. So you have to know your business in order to fight for the equipment you need. But it's really important that you do that pre-planning.
Yeah, so you brought up pre-planning and you brought up fighting, which is two really major parts of it. So I've been through quite a few revamping and rebuilding sterile processings, and we always have great plans. Like we have, like we're going to have these many sterilizers, this many washers, and you look at it and you say, "This is perfect. This is going to make everything flow." Then, as you start to actually do the process, they start taking away from you. Like administration will go, well, we really can't buy all, four this time. So we're going to start off with two, and then we're going to put another one in another year. Like that gets very frustrating because I think a lot of times we make great plans, but I never see it actually happen. They always pull away.
But again, you've got to justify why you need it,
Yeah.
because they never consider sterile processing because we don't generate income. Okay,
Hmm.
we cost the facility, but what they don't understand is you can't make income unless you have the instruments that we provide to you. So if you're taking equipment away from us or delaying the equipment, that's going to delay our ability to get the instruments for you to do the cases. You're going to have delays, you may have cancellations, and your surgeons aren't going to be happy. What sense does that make?
Yeah. Yep.
But
I,
you've got to fight for the equipment that you need, because unfortunately that's just the nature of the beast with sterile processing. Now I can tell you, I've heard from other facilities where there was total support for SPD. They got everything they needed. It was a state of the art department, and everybody was happy, and it ran like a charm.
uh
So you have to know the culture at your facility and engage as much support for the equipment that you need. Now, when it comes to surgery centers, and again, we're still talking decontam, that is even worse in terms of planning, because the surgery centers are usually run by doctors or a company that owns a bunch of surgery centers. More and more doctors are taking ownership, and that's fine. The problem is they hire a company, and these companies are one stop shopping. They come in, they get the certificate of need, they get the equipment, they get the supplies, they buy the instruments, they take care of everything. When they're done, they hand the keys to the surgeons group and say, "You're ready to get started." And that's it. The surgeons have well, they may have input into the instruments they want. They may want a certain manufacturer's instruments, but for the most part, the equipment that you need is all done by the company. So when I go into a surgery center, the first thing I notice is they have a sink that is smaller than a hand wash sink, and that's supposed to be your decontam sink. Problem number one. Problem number two, they don't have a sonic. Why? You don't need one. Well, what do they know? These
uh
planners don't know what the standards are. They don't know about manufacturer's instructions. Their job is to save the company or the surgeons group money.
uh
Okay. You've given me a budget. We're going to bring you in on budget or under budget. I don't know if this is truthful, but sometimes there's even a bonus in there. If they come in under budget, they get a bonus. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it behooves them to do it. Okay. So they may or may not get a Sonic. If they get them a Sonic, they get them a tabletop. Well, did anybody investigate what kind of surgery? This results in people taking the tray and having to tilt it on edge, both in the sink and in the Sonic. And it takes twice as long because then you have to tilt it the other way. Meanwhile, your instruments are getting all banged together, which can damage them. Okay. But again, these planners are not clinicians, so they don't know that. Then when
Yeah.
it comes to washers, because they give them a very small, usually it's like 8 by 10, the decontam room. Okay.
Yeah.
They'll give them an under the counter washer. Now, that may be okay. However, once the instruments are clean, you are bringing them back into your decontam room. You have to take very special precautions. You have to change your gown, change your gloves, take the instruments out, make sure you're not touching any counters or anything, and then put them in a clean tote bin so that they can go over to the clean side.
uh
That's a lot of extra work for people, a lot of extra PPE, but that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
So these are the things that really impact on your surgery centers. They don't really understand what they're doing. And then once you get in and you say, no, I need a big sonic, there's no room for it. You're lucky if you have a counter to offload the trays. And the room is so small and you have so much heat coming out of the washer that I don't know how people could even work in there. It's so hot.
Yeah, I worked in a few surgery centers earlier in my career, and you're right. Every center I had a tabletop Sonic, and usually in the beginning, because I did a lot of opening, and in the beginning it was okay because there really wasn't much going on. But
Mhm.
as time, like a lot of places, we could start doing, laminectomies, the minor ones, nothing, too invasive, and then I'm getting these trays, and here I am, trying to follow the rules as best as I can with the tabletop, where I'm taking the instruments out of the loaner, holder, the pan, and just putting them, little by little into the little sonic, so they're getting some sonification, but it's so not correct and ideal.
And, I've been to surgery centers where they start with endoscopy.
Mhm.
And, they have a nice room where they're doing the scopes and what have you. And then all of a sudden they decide, we want to do spines. Well, you don't have the space to do spines, not only in decontam, because you don't even have the sink you need to clean the scopes. And now you want to bring, all the spine trays in there. You don't have room to even offload them and put them in the washer. You
Uh-huh.
don't have the sonic where the trays are going to fit into the sonic. And then what are you going to do on the clean side when you disinfect the scopes? You're going to have a sterilizer that is going to have have a partition away from the automated endoscope reprocessor, because when they come out, they're usually wet, and you don't want splashing onto your sterile packaging.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just, they don't understand why you have to make certain concessions in the beginning. And I always ask them, if you're ever going to think about doing another, well, we didn't know when we started, we really want to expand our practice. Well, if they're in a building that they own, that's one thing. But most of them, at least my experience, they're renting space.
Yes.
So they don't even have boilers. They have to have generators on their sterilizers, which is another issue we'll talk about later. So they can't expand. I only had one facility, an eye facility, many years ago that was cited by the state here. And this doctor was mortified. I mean, he had a state of the art practice. He was well known all over the place. Called me in. We made all the changes, and he did need more space. He actually got the owner of the building to move another tenant to another space so that the physician could expand his department. He spent $1
Hmm.
million, and this was at least 20 years ago. And he has a state of the art, even today, eye surgery center, eye and cataracts. He is known all over. He even has a service where he'll pick up the clients and bring them to have the surgery. But that's not the usual thing. Mostly, if they're renting space, they are locked in. So then they have big problems. And what happens? No, we've got to do it. We already signed the contract with the surgeons that they could bring their cases here. And I tell them, I can't help you.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to tell you to do something that's wrong. So if you can find somebody that'll tell you, you can go ahead and do it, God bless you, but it's not going to be me.
Yeah. No, you have to be upfront and honest from the very beginning.
Absolutely. And I always tell people, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you the truth.
Hmm.
Because if I don't tell you the truth, I'm hurting you and your patients. Unfortunately, I've seen people do that. Why? They don't want to lose the business.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll help you with this. Don't worry. We can work around it. It doesn't work that way, people. Either you comply with the standards or you don't. If you don't, eventually it's going to get you. It may not happen right away, but eventually it will catch up with you.
Yeah. And also they don't, with the building structure, nobody ever considers how we're, especially in a surgery center, how are we transporting the instruments? They don't leave room for case carts to go into the decontam, or have counter space to put portable storage bins in there, or or bin, a biohazard label bin for your instruments on the counter. They really don't even think that part out straight.
Well, most of them are now because of, they're really getting hit because Joint Commission does also inspect for OSHA, and now
Mhm.
they're going to inspect for CMS as well. So that's a double whammy. But it's really important that they understand that you have to comply with OSHA. And, again, if you're a small surgery center, say you're an eye center, they're turning over those cases every 15 minutes. You don't want to have a cart there to put all of the soil trays on because those instruments are very difficult to clean because of their design. So you want to get them cleaned as soon as possible. So in the eye centers, I tell them, no, have the bin, treat them, get them in so you can get them cleaned as soon as possible. Because when you have those very delicate tips, you could get material on there that's difficult to remove, especially if they dry. So you have to know the practice. If they're doing orthopedics, then yes, can you, if they don't want to buy case carts because it's too expensive, then get a wire cart and get your toe pins, your hazard toe pins. Have them outside the room. You bring them in the room at the end of the case. You treat the instruments, put them in, and then bring them down the hall. And those bins could sit outside of the decontam room, and they could bring them in one at a time if they're short of space. There's ways to work around it. Think outside the box.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, also with the decontam, they have automatic flush machines for cannulated instruments. That I've only seen very rarely. Y- I just I part of me likes to see that, to have people to have more of equipment of what they really need to make sure they clean the instruments they have.
Well, there's a couple of things we have to look at. First of all, let's go back. We talked about the washers.
Uh-huh.
Most of your washers today are washer decontaminators. They have multiple layers, but they all function a little bit differently. So I always tell people to, yes, go out there and look at equipment, bring one of your technicians with you so that, they're going to be using it. They'll be able to say, oh, that looks like a problem. And don't allow the salespeople to tell you what you need. Okay. You are in charge of this department. And if you don't feel comfortable, then ask your staff. They'll tell you. Because you and I both know, Jason, we could count on our fingers and toes the number of places we've been to that have had equipment just sitting collecting dust that the hospital paid a lot of money for, but people don't use it because it's too labor intensive or too difficult or takes too much time.
Uh-huh.
And when you consider you're only getting this apartment every 15 to 20 years, and this equipment is outrageously expensive, we can't afford to be wasting money on equipment that we're not going to use.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to pare things down. I'll never forget, there was one hospital system that asked my boss to send me there. They were going through a big remodeling of the operating room, and they wanted me to look at their equipment. At that time, I think their equipment, and again, this was maybe about 15, oh no, maybe 20 years ago. Their equipment was close to $1 million for all the operating rooms. And by the time I got through going through the whole equipment list, I removed $350,000 of equipment they didn't need.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
unless people are going through this, is questioning, why do I need a basin rack? We don't even do basins. Why do I need a utensil rack? We don't do utensils.
Uh-huh.
Um, you know, well, it comes with it. No, it doesn't. All of that are accessories that are add-ons.
Yeah.
When it comes to the lumen cleaners, and I know there's a lot of them out there that do flushing and what have you. There's a lot of documentation out there with Corey Ofsted that says nothing will clean your lumens as good as scrubbing them with the appropriate size brush in decontam, doing your rinse, then checking them to make sure they're clean. And then you can put them through the sonic and you can put them through the washer. That's like icing on the cake.
Uh-huh.
But that is the best way to clean your lumens. And if you do it that way, you're going to have very few lumen cleaning failures. The other thing you have to watch out for are your sonics. Now, I don't know about the large sonics, but since Amy published the water quality document, a lot of IFUs are changing, so people better get updated IFUs. And your utility water may not meet the quality standards for utility water in 108. But when it comes to the final rinse, you do have to have treated water. But for your sonics, I haven't seen this for the large sonics, but especially for the tabletops, I'm seeing a lot of them now want you to use distilled water.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure to comply with that. Do you have enough distilled water in your facility to accommodate? You should know that before you buy the sonic. See, what happens is people find out after the fact. Get the IFUs and read them before you buy them. I talked in another episode that we had about someone who bought a new AER. And after she bought it, not an AER, it was a flusher. And after she bought it, she found that she had to use a specific detergent from the manufacturer. And she said, why? I said, because it's in the instruction for use. It says you must use. That's different in an IFU. It says use an enzymatic, neutral pH enzymatic detergent. You could use any one you want. But when they say you have to use ABC detergent, you have to. So she had to now buy a detergent off contract just for that one piece of equipment. You got to read the IFUs and know what you're buying before you make a decision. And of course, today with your Sonics, some of them have a weight limit. What weight you can put in there. So now if you're thinking of putting your ortho trays in there that shouldn't weigh more than 25 pounds, and you might have a weight limit of 15, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So these are all the things you have to look for. So you're not buying a pig in a poke.
Yeah, I could tell you every time I wanted to get a new Sonic, I would do all the research, get the great, pick out the best Sonic, hand it to my boss. It always comes back, oh, that company's not on contract. And
yeah, that's a big issue.
Get it. Never get it.
That's a big issue. The only thing you could do is do a comparison, but I know where you're coming from. I could tell you in my system, if I felt that this equipment had to be purchased off contract, I gave them the documentation, and invariably I was able to get it. But
Right.
It's very tough if you're in a corporate situation where the contract is the Bible and they don't go up it for anything. Then unfortunately, all you could do is buy the equipment that they're allowing you to get and try and get the best possible model that you could get. That's all you can do.
Yeah. Because like I said in another podcast too, even surgeons now that are hospital employed are getting told no on things they want, and they don't get it now.
Yeah, well, that's why they don't like people like you and me working directly in the field, because we were fighters, and I mean, if you don't stand up for what you believe in, and it isn't even that you have loyalty to this product, you've had experience with it, you know that it's superior to another product, and more importantly, I judge a company by how they treat you when something goes wrong. They always, will bend over backwards when they're looking for the business. But when something goes wrong, if they stand up and take care of it right away, then you know that you have a good company. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. I hear from people, it takes forever to get service. When the service does get done, it doesn't work. 2 days later, it's down again. And, that's not good. You get what you pay for sometimes.
Oh yeah, so I started my career off up north in the New Jersey area, and that area was usually had a lot of one sterilizer company that was phenomenal. Worked with those sterilizers for years. Was lucky enough that they had a good stance in New Jersey where their sterilizers were used all over the place. I moved down south, and their competitor really had the market in the south.
Yeah.
And I just went from always having reliable machines to breakdown.
I know. It's really tough today when we have a situation like that. The one good thing is that, the industry did respond to a need and now have the multi-level Sonics. So in your smaller facilities, I was in a very small hospital up in way northern New Hampshire, and they had one room where they were doing the scopes and all their other instruments, including spines. The only Sonic they had was a tabletop that nobody used because nothing fit in it. And they were disinfecting the scopes in the same room, and they knew it was wrong. So I was able to find a room right across the hall that was like a supply closet, which we had them take all the supplies out. They moved the AER in there. They got the plumbing installed, and so the scopes were cleaned and disinfected in that one room. We had a barrier between the clean side and the dirty side. The other room now became exclusively for instrumentation, but where were we going to put a sonic? There was no room there. So I told them about the multi-level sonics. They brought, I don't know if they brought the 3 or the 6 level in, but they thought they died and went to heaven because now they were able to comply. They knew that they weren't complying with the standards, but they didn't know how to fix it. So that's a good thing that we now have multiple companies that offer multi-level sonics because we really do need them.
Yeah. Well, one of the other issues with the washers that I've seen, the the racks that go inside the washer, sometimes people are sold too many, and then they're on the floor.
Yeah.
And again, if you're going to choose to have 10 or 12 of them, you have to have enough carts to push
Yeah.
them on. You can't just lay
Well,
them on the floor.
you need a minimum of two, preferably three, because one you're loading and decontam, one should be in the washer washing, and one should be on the clean side where they're unloading it. Now
Hmm.
you might be able to get away with two. One you're loading, one in the washer. That
Yep.
depends on how your cases are coming or what have you. Sometimes what they'll do is order two for each washer and then have two spares. So if you do need another one, you pull it.
Yep.
But you only want to have enough loading racks that you need and make sure they're all numbered. So when you do the testing of your equipment, you make sure that you're testing all of your racks as well to make sure they're cleaning. And that's another thing. It is absolutely critical that whenever you purchase this equipment, that all of your staff members are thoroughly in service, what they are responsible to do. There's certain maintenance that you have to do with the spray arms, with the spinners, and that has to be done every day. The company should provide you with a checklist, and you should be documenting that it's done. And if the salespeople only do it once, then you record it so everyone could be in service. But that is a critical piece of functionality for your washers. That you have failures because the spray arms are all clogged, or they're not rotating properly, or sometimes even too much detergent is going in, and it looks like all this white foam in there. They're not getting rinsed properly. So
Yeah.
all of that is important. Plus, many of your washers today have a printout. If they do have a printout, you're required to interpret it, make sure all the parameters for that cycle were met, and initial it and retain it.
Hmm.
Because anytime you have a printout, you're required to retain it. So all of those things are critical.
Yeah. Uh, And then also, we have the cart washer, which a lot of people sometimes struggle to be able to get because of space. And then I feel so bad for the people that don't have them. That got
Yeah.
to weight carts manually. That's rough.
Well, no, you're rough. I mean, you wear your knees out because if,
Yeah.
even if you have a high boy, type of cart versus the horizontal cart, you still have to get down on that lower level because
Mhm.
once they're washed, as they'll sell them to you and say your cart will come out completely dry.
Yeah.
Maybe 90%. And a lot has to do with how you load them in there too. We have to load them the right way so the water drips out. But the problem is if you do not dry them, then you could wind up with waterborne microorganisms such as Pseudomonas growing in the cart.
Mhm.
And now you're putting sterile product in there. I always, when I designed my sterile processing areas, I designed an air hose on the clean side of the cart washer. So when it came out clean, we would use a rag, a lint-free cloth to dry any water we saw, but then we dried it again with the air, compressed air, instrument air, sorry, instrument air to make sure that the entire cart was clean. And that's really important that you have that to make it easier so people are not getting down on their hands and knees or reusing, even if it's a lint-free cloth when they get wet. You're really not drying because you're starting with a damp cloth.
Hmm. Yeah. And then we have, again, when you're talking about being sold for additional products for cart washers. You have like, they try to sell you the racks to wash your instruments in,
Yeah.
and
Well, you know, some people want to have it. I don't know why, because we buy a cart washer to wash carts.
mhm,
And if we have a case cart system and we are tying up the cart washer with instruments, I'm now going to be holding back my case carts.
yep,
And that's going to be causing major problems for me. But if you've done your homework and you feel you can do it, then you have to make sure that you follow all of the recommendations from the manufacturer. What type of instruments can go in? Are there any weight limits? Are there lumen length or diameter constraints, which there could be?
mhm,
Okay, which we have on almost every tray, and then you have to do the testing on that cycle. Let's talk about the testing that we have to do on this equipment, because you have, as you mentioned, your washer decontaminators. For your washers, you have to do a cleaning effectiveness test every day that the washer is used. So if you're not using a washer today because it's not working, you have to document that in your logbook. Because anytime you don't perform a test according to your policy, you're in violation. Okay.
mhm,
So you do that test every day, but not only on the washer, you have to make sure every rack is tested. So if I have two racks for washer one, I do rack number one in the first testing and rack number two in that same washer for the second testing. When it comes to your sonics, you have to do two tests. Now, they could be combined on the same one. You have to do a cavitation test to make sure that the sound waves, ultrasonic part is working. And you have to do a cleaning effectiveness test. And then on your cart washer, you do a cart wash test. That is done every day the cart washer is used on the cart wash cycle. If you have the instrument cycle and you're using it, then you do that test on a daily basis with the cleaning effectiveness test according to the manufacturer's instructions. So all of those tests have to be done and documented to make sure that the equipment is working properly.
mhm. Yeah. Oh yes. The other thing too, Nance, is a lot of places now when they're revamping or buying equipment, they're buying drying cabinets that will go in between decontam and the clean side, where they can put it in the drying cabinet on the decontam side. There's been a lot of concerns, and a lot of people are not really sure, should they be using drying cabinets, not using drying cabinets, are their instruments validated for it?
Well, when you talk about drying cabinets, um, in our in our days, the drying cabinets that we were provided were the old respiratory therapy drying cabinets, where they would clean the respiratory therapy tubings and mass and dry the mass and tubings and things like that. Since Amy came out with ST79 and talked about using instrument air or HEPA filtered air, so we didn't recontaminate the items, companies have come out with drying cabinets with HEPA filtered or instrument air in it. Now, is there anything wrong with it? No. But why am I paying for a big piece of equipment that's taking up a lot of space, a lot of money, when I get instrument air on the clean side and it does the same thing? Now, if your washer is functioning properly, you should have a heated cycle at the end that does the decontamination of the instruments.
Mhm.
There is a test you can do, and I do recommend you do it at least once a week. It's called a temp check, and it'll tell you if your washer is getting that elevated temperature to reduce the microbial load so you can handle the instruments safely. That also has the effect of drying your instruments. Now, the problem is, as the equipment gets older, it's not as efficient. Like we get older, we can't do things the way we did when we were younger. But that's what instrument air is for. Your instruments should come out almost completely dry, but it has to do with how you loaded them. If you have a big pile of instruments in there, yes, you're opening them, but if they're piled up, they probably are going to come out wet. So that's what you have your instrument air. You never want to put wet instruments into a sterilizer, because your sterilizer was never set up to dry that amount of moisture. So you're having a wet pack problem from the get go.
Hmm.
But you need it for your items that are going into low temperature anyway, if you have low temperature. So for my opinion, you should just use the instrument air. But if they're going to give you, sometimes they'll say, we'll give you a cabinet. Again, why do I need another piece of equipment I got to worry about?
Yeah.
I got to worry about cleaning it. I've got to worry about monitoring it. Make sure if there's filters, we're cleaning the filters. I want less work, not more.
I
That's
tell
just
you,
my opinion. Spend the money on stuff we really need, that we can't do any other way.
it's funny when you were talking about drying cabinets. My earlier in career, my drying cabinets were always empty sterilizers.
Oh, yes, I've seen people do that as well.
That was very common.
Yes, yes, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah. So now I guess we'll move over to our prep and pack area, which is usually right next to the sterilization area. We could talk about some equipment in that area.
Well, mainly in your sterilization area, what type of sterilization are you going to be doing? Again, do you have all your IFUs? When you purchase, especially specialty items like power equipment, um, um, semi-rigid scopes like choledocoscopes and flexible ureteroscopes, um, most of them today are still low temperature. Then you have to decide, in addition to steam, what type of low temperature. So let's start with steam. The majority of devices that are made in the United States, basic instruments, were validated for pre-vacuum 274 minutes.
Hmm.
But as we mentioned, we do have instruments that, sometimes are validated at 275 for 3 minutes. And that is a validated US cycle as well. The manufacturers did respond about 15 years ago, and both of them now have the two major manufacturers, and it may be all of them now. I can't say for certain, but you want to make sure that your steam sterilizer at least has those two cycles. They usually always have a gravity cycle, 250, 30 minutes, and that's it. Now you can set up special cycles. For example, if you have a drill that needs 6 minutes of exposure at 270, you could set that up. You can always extend the sterilization time. You could always extend the dry time, but you can't change the validated temperatures. So you need to get the user manual before you purchase the sterilizer. And if you know that you have any instruments that were validated in Europe and have a 273 cycle and it's not in the user manual, then you can't process them. Now, maybe they have a sterilizer that has 273, and some manufacturers are responding to that as well. But you
Hmm.
have to understand what you're buying before you buy it to make sure it's going to meet the needs. You don't want to, after it comes in, say, well, what do I do with all these instruments now? I got to go buy another sterilizer. It's always less expensive to bundle things and get them all at the same time. So that's the first caveat. The second thing is, what size sterilizer? If you're in an ambulatory surgery center, you probably just need a 36-inch, or some of them only have a 24-inch. It's the same size as a flash sterilizer, but they're used for
Yeah.
wrap cycles. So either of those, they usually do not. The smaller ones do not have a cart. The 36-inch may have a cart available. Um, if you're doing larger cases, then you may need a 48-inch, and they do have a 60-inch. So whatever you need to get the job done, and that will dictate how many carts you need. Now you have to remember, bigger is not always better. I remember going to a very famous hospital a number of years ago that had custom made, almost like a walk-in sterilizer. It was absolutely
Wow.
huge, and you would get four carts in there at the same time. And I'm going to myself, they're waiting until they have four carts to load the sterilizer.
Hmm.
That is backing up all of your work. You want that sterilizer in and out, working all day long so we get the turnaround of that instrumentation. So
Yep.
don't think that bigger is always better. You want to have as many sterilizers as you need, but you want to make sure you have a continuous throughput. And then, of course, you need, if you have three sterilizers now, you know you need at least one more. Whether you're planning a new department or renovating, I've mentioned before, have them put in the drain lines and the plumbing to add additional washers, at least two. You could do one at a time, and additional steam sterilizers, because it's very costly to go back and have to dig up. Or if you're on an upper floor, it's virtually impossible because now you have in one of our hospitals, ICU was below sterile processing. They could not touch anything in there.
Hmm.
There was no place to move ICU. So this is why the planning is so important, especially if you're on an upper floor.
Yeah,
Uh,
I had that in a job where I had the washers that we were, my decontam was above the operating room, and every I had really poor washers that constantly leaked, and every few weeks a call from the OR, it's leaking in our OR.
yeah.
Like it's you
One of
know
the second hospital I worked at was a Catholic hospital, and I did not know that our department was right over the president's office, which is a Catholic priest, a Catholic nun. She had been there for years. God bless her. She was wonderful. And all of a sudden, I get a call from engineering. And they said, "You're flooding out the president's office." And I said, "From what?" He goes, "From your washer." We had no idea.
yeah,
So, I mean, that's one of the dangers when you have sterile processing on the upper floors. I mean, everything we do involves water,
yeah,
but it's really important. You don't want to have a lot of these carts hanging around. They take up a lot of space. But you need to have enough carts so that, again, one you're loading, one is in the sterilizer, one should be cooling. But what I usually did was I bought two for each sterilizer, and then had, if I had three sterilizers, I would have two backups, so that if we had one, and your carts, sometimes you have a problem with the wheels of things and they're out of commission. So you
yeah.
need to have that to continue working too.
Well, so also now it's getting pushed in the industry, and I'm starting to see a lot down south, a lot of facilities going this way. Is there's new equipment where you don't have to wrap your trays, and you can put them in a sterilization big
Oh
box.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, and that goes right into the sterilizer, and then that comes out and it goes right into the room and it gets opened up in the room, and then they take the instruments out. But that's again space. uh if something is wrong in that with one tray, that means all of it's contaminated.
yeah. That's the issue. Again, these are wonderful ideas that people come up with, but there is no quick fix to sterilization. You know,
Mhm.
uh, I understand that wrappers get torn, and that's one of the reasons why this system was developed. But what about your other trays? We're focusing mainly on, even though any tray can go in there, but the real focus was on orthopedics. Because
Yeah.
if you have a problem with all of your trays getting ripped, you've got bigger problems. Something else is going on. Maybe you need to change your wrap or change your process. But
Yes.
again, this is just my opinion. I don't believe in buying these new systems because I haven't really felt there was a need to justify the cost.
Mhm.
If you're able to justify it and that's what your facility is experiencing, then that's your decision. But I personally wouldn't have one.
Yeah, I can tell you, I always made it a point, if something was new, not to touch it for like a good 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And um, we didn't learn our lesson, and I have to tell this horror story because it really is a horror story. Um, in the early '90s, when I started at St. Barnabas, um, we were approached by Johnson and Johnson that they had a new sterilization system, and it would reduce the ethylene oxide cycle that we were using, which was 12 plus hours because we had the pressurized system 8812, to 90 minutes. And the first time they came to visit me, I threw them out of my office because I thought they were wasting my time. So a year later, they came back and they said, we have this system, and we'd like, your hospital to do some clinical trials. So we brought it to the internal review board. I read up on it, didn't understand a word of what was in there, because now they're talking about free radicals and plasma, and this was all Greek to us. We never heard of this in our in our repertoire for sterile processing. But I've said many times my gut rarely fails me, and I said, a company like Johnson and Johnson, I can't imagine them coming out with a product that wasn't going to work. So it didn't cost us anything. We were going to do all the testing. It would not be used on patients. They would bring people in to work with us. They would bring all the supplies. We just had to put the time in. And I'm the type of person that I love to get involved with new and innovative stuff, even though every single colleague of mine told me I was crazy. Not kidding. I took so much heat for that you would not believe. But we did it anyway. And, we learned a lot. They told us not to put, we found that the cameras, all of the coloring was coming off from the peroxide. So they learned that they had to contact the companies to change the paint they were using or the coloring they were using. They told me not to put it in containers with little holes, which we did. Went through all the testing. And during this time, another company came to me and said, would you like to do some testing on our product? And I said, hey, I got one. That's enough. I'm sorry. Too little, too late. Now, when the first company came to us, they did show us their documentation from the FDA, what they were cleared for. Okay. The second company promised to send it to me. They never did. 1 or 2 years later, I hear that the FDA did a search and seizure at a number of hospitals because they were using this second low temperature system. And 9 cataract patients had damage to their retinas during surgery. And they shut the system down. When they did their research, they found that the company was selling I think it was a 6 cubic foot unit, and they were only validated for 2 cubic feet, something like that. They were misrepresenting their clearances. And there were over 100 hospitals that brought this equipment in that had to shut them down. And they're unusable. Nobody will touch them. And at that time, the equipment was $110,000 plus the consumables. So who was at fault? Well, first of all, the company, 2 of them were sent to jail. I think they should have been in there for a long time, really. But you, as the manager, brought that equipment in. You should have done your homework. You should have known what questions to ask. And again, I know sometimes I'm really hard on the managers, but you are supposed to be the expert. You have to ask the hard questions. That's why salespeople don't like, when you ask hard questions, because they're taught to tell you all the good about something, which is wonderful. But give me the bad so I can make a decision. Maybe it's not so bad that I'm still going to buy it. But this was a big black eye on our profession, a big black eye. And all of those people that were telling me, you're crazy, shut them up big time.
Yeah.
Because we never had a problem. And after a year of testing, all of our testing was submitted to the FDA. We got clearance to use it on patients. We had to track to the patient for, I think, either 30 or 60 days. And then after that, we didn't have to track anymore. And let me tell you, we were the envy of so many facilities because now we were turning over our lap instruments all day long. And it was no more, gotta take this out because we need this tray for tomorrow. Oh, no, we started the cycle. I can't give it to you. The cycle started. Open it. We can't open it. We've got gas in there. I mean, there were nightmares. So, but, you've got to, if you get an opportunity to work on something that's new and innovative, I say go for it because you never know when we're going to find, another major change in sterilization. But you are responsible. Nobody else in your hospital would have the knowledge that you have to bring that in. And if you do your homework, then you can present it in a way that's going to I let them know whether they want to do it or not.
Yeah.
That was a big black eye, and I will never forget that.
Oh my God. Yeah. That it is, most people would run from that. Obviously, I know you're not somebody that would run from a challenge, but I think that's fantastic that, again, you were able to even be a part of something like that.
Well, even with IFUs, I was at a friend's hospital visiting her, and a sales rep came in and he had a new rigid container. And he said, "Oh, I've been trying to reach you for weeks." He said, "Well, I'm waiting for her. Can I show you my container?" So he showed it to me, and it happened to have a lock on all four sides. And I said, "Why would you have a container with a lock on all four sides?" I said, "That's extra work for us." I said, "Plus we have to pay more for the locks." And he goes, "Oh, well, you could just put two on." Your IFU says four. So you're telling me not to comply with your IFU? Thank you very much. Please leave.
Yep. There's also another thing too. I think is it's kind of a newer practice, which I absolutely love, is the borescope on the clean side to look through your cannulas. Now, there's a lot of arguments, because of equipment and spending, that you only need one or two in your clean side. I have to say, I've worked that way with one or two, like two machines or one in my clean side. To me, it don't work. You really feel like you need a borescope on every workstation.
I have a little different opinion on that, Jason. I believe that for lumens, the cleaning effectiveness needs to be done in decontam.
Yeah.
Nothing should be going into the clean side unless it's safe to handle.
Hmm.
Because if you do find something and it comes out, now you've contaminated your workstation. You're not wearing PPE. It's no different than people who are using, the what do you call the lint-free Q-tips or what have you to check, or using a syringe. It makes no difference.
Hmm.
I think all of the cleaning effectiveness testing for lumen should be done in decontam. You have your machine there, your borescope. You could check them after you've done the lumens. You could
Hmm.
even check them after you've done the sonication. If they're clean, then you put them in the washer, and again, that's going to be your final step.
Hmm.
Um, Once it comes on the clean side, it's too late.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. The same thing with your readeroscopes and things like that. They need to be checked for lumens in decontam.
You know what I like though about the borescope, and this was very helpful, and actually that I had a job I had in 2 years ago, was when they were on the clean side looking, not necessarily looking for any debris, but just seeing how overused they were in the inside,
Hmm.
to warn us to say, you know what, this does not looking good. It's not dirty, but it's still not looking good. Let's replace it. And I
Yes,
really like that.
yes. There's a lot of evidence that's been published about, from the instruments that they use in the scopes, they create fissures inside, and that's where the microorganisms can hide. But of
Mhm,
course, you can't see that. You also can't see if the cleaning, if they're not tested in the decontam side, you're going to find there may be some detergent that's left in there. Even if you're not going to be doing, if you're not doing flexible scopes, what about your arthroscopes?
mhm,
There's a couple pictures they have in one of the Amy documents that shows a bristle from a brush
mhm.
inside the arthroscope. So you really should have them on both sides. But I'm a firm believer that do it in decontam so that we're making sure that nothing comes on the clean side that isn't completely clean. But you're absolutely right. There's been outbreak of infection that has been documented from scopes that were clean and disinfected according to the IFU, but was still contaminated. And that was the
Yeah.
reason why, for damage.
I guess my point really was more so when you had one on let's I had them on both sides. They were checking on the dirty side, and then we did a second check on the clean side.
Okay.
But I had only one on the clean side. And I felt like that was such a waste because that required people to leave their workstation, walk
Mhm.
over, check it. And then there are some people who don't like to get out of their chair, so then they wouldn't check theirs.
Yeah.
So that's what I guess my point was, is that if you're going to have them on each workstation, and like kind of like a magnifying lamp, they part of their job, they have to do it.
Yeah, and if you can put that in the budget, that would be the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
But if not, maybe depending on the size of your department, just like, we had to decide where we were going to have the printers to print out the count sheets. Okay.
Yep.
We would have three printers located so somebody didn't have to take more than, say, 10 steps to get to one. You could do
Mhm.
the same thing with your borescopes if you're under a budget. But
Yes.
yeah, I mean, you should have them on both the clean and the dirty side.
Absolutely, because because like I said, double checks is not bad, and sometimes, I worked a lot of decontam. Sometimes your eyes you're a little foggy because it's hot in there. You might not see as well as the person in the. You mean well and you want to clean it and you try your hardest. That's why I always tell people when they get upset when they're working decontam and somebody sends something back. Don't get upset.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you did a bad job. Not everybody's perfect.
Well, and the other thing you want to plan for on the clean side, preferably to have your instrument air at each workstation. They
Yes.
could do a drop down and multiple plugs because you have multiple things that you're plugging in, especially with computers and things like that. And while we're talking about computers, make sure you have a policy. Who's responsible to clean them? It is not the responsibility of environmental services. That
Uh-huh.
is your responsibility. And every day, I just get crazy when I go in and I see the workstation has been wiped down, but you have this much dust on the printer, on the keyboard, underneath the computer. That there's space there because it's on a little rack. Nobody's cleaning there.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So that has to be cleaned every single day because, especially when the computer's on, there's a fan so that dust could be blown over to another table if the tables are back to back. So if you're getting computers, make sure that you have a policy that they're going to be cleaned on a daily basis because that is your responsibility.
Yep. We got just a few minutes, Nance, and I think
I
before we
just
leave, yeah.
two things before I forget, Jason. Even though this isn't equipment and it's usually the responsibility of safety, make sure you have an emergency eye wash that meets ANSI standards in decontam, regardless of your size, because that has to do with the detergents. If you have a separate room for endoscopy, in the decontam room, you need one. In the clean room, you need one because there's chemicals in both. And in sterile processing, the sterilization area, if you are doing high level disinfection, you need one there. If you're not, but you're doing low temperature, you need one there. We're still finding way too many places that do not have an eye wash on the clean side because they didn't think they need one for low temperature sterilization. Now,
Yep.
if you have both low temperature and high level disinfection, as long as it's within 10 seconds travel time of both, you're okay. But that's
With,
something that I often find missing.
with no obstacles too. Like you can't have
Right,
doors. Yep.
right.
Yep.
Unobstructed, correct.
Unobstructed. Yep. Yeah, that's very important because a lot of people forget they usually have a door between them. So what I was going to say was we should give some recommendation on sterilizers on the amount. We didn't really give any. We gave it on for the washers, but for low temperature sterilizers and sterilizers, I think a lot of people get shortchanged on.
Well, I think low temperature, again, depending on your volume of items that go through,
Mhm.
usually one is enough. Caveat, what happens when it goes down?
Yes.
Okay. When it comes to steam, look at how many you have now. Are you constantly behind the eight ball because of equipment breaking down or insufficient quantities? And the companies usually have a matrix that will help you. They're saying if you do this many trays, you're going to need this many sterilizers. So that's usually, I find, a very good matrix to use. But you cannot give a formula that'll apply to everybody because a facility is not a facility because it's dependent on the types of cases you're doing, the needs for a total a facility doing only cataracts are going to be totally different from a surgery center that's only doing spines, from a hospital that's doing trauma in addition to everything else. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why you're going to have to depend on your equipment planners for that information. And again, when you go to other facilities, try and visit facilities that have your similar size and ask them, how's it working? Do you do all these services? That you find that 8 sterilizers was enough? That's the best you can do, because there is no one size fits all.
Not in our business.
No.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it at that. We hit our hour mark. I just want to thank the listeners. I hope this was educational for you, and I hope you can pick out a lot of good information that will help you. Please like, subscribe, and leave any kind of comments, especially if you have a topic. Let us know.
Yes, and at the end of this presentation, we're going to give you some slides to show different types of equipment, different sizes of equipment, just to give you an idea of some of the equipment that's available today.
Here are some examples of a tabletop sterilizers that are found in surgery centers, veterinarian offices, and dental facilities. These are some examples of small capacity mechanical washers. This one on the left is an under-the-counter type with a single door. The other one is a tabletop. Here we have an example of a tabletop sonic that are often found in surgical centers and dental offices. On the left here, we have a multi-level sonic which is able to process multiple trays, usually 3 trays, at once in the ultrasonic machine. Next to it, we have a large steam sterilizer with a loading cart. These types of sonics and sterilizers are found in larger sterile processing departments. On this next slide, we have large mechanical washers. On the left-hand side, we have a mechanical washer that would go under a countertop, and on the right, we have a large washer that usually has a double door that can access from both of the clean and dirty sides. To receive your free CEU approved by the CBSSPD and HSPA, go to www.spdceus.com. Watch the entire podcast on the Sterile Processing University page, and then after that, you will receive a free 1-hour CEU. Thank you.
There's a girl you'll fall in love with sooner